having worked in the pharmaceutical industry, side effects are usually, the negative side effects of drugs. And I thought, a side effect really is just something that happens alongside the thing that you're trying to achieve. That's all a side effect is. It's just something that happens alongside the thing that you're trying to do. So they're not all bad. It turns out that when you be kind to someone, there's quite a lot of things that happen alongside that. And some of them are incredibly healthy, including the impact on your blood, on your heart and your blood, which I'll come to in a moment. And so I wanted to run through the 5 side effects of kindness. And the first one is a kind of no-brainer. And most of us are probably familiar with this, that kindness makes you feel happier. So kindness makes you feel happier. And it's a kind of no-brainer because I think we've all had the experience of you feel good when you help someone, don't you? You actually you feel good. And the initial research into this is when scientists did big studies of thousands of people who did volunteer work. And they found that on average, about 95% of people who do regular volunteering work report feeling happier while or immediately after doing their volunteer work. So that kind of gave birth to a whole area of research. And scientists have now kind of quantified it a little bit more. And you're supposed to eat 5 pieces of fruit and vegetable a day. That's the conventional wisdom, and it's very good if it's plant-based, if you're eating a plant-based diet, which I kind of mostly do actually. But scientists have done 5-a-day studies, but with kindness. And the way they did it is they got groups of volunteers to pick up one day of the week and do 5 acts of kindness on that day. So from the moment you get out of bed in the morning till the moment you go to bed at night, you've got to do 5 acts of kindness. And the same day, every week for like 6 weeks. And preferably vary the act. So for example, if you say, I'll make my other half breakfast in bed. And let's say I'll start on a Friday. So every Friday, including today, for the next 6 weeks, I'm going to do 5 acts of kindness. So today I made breakfast in bed for my other half. So if you make breakfast in bed the following week, it doesn't count because you've done it already. So you're supposed to vary the acts just to get a wee bit more creativity. But anyway, in every study of that exact nature or like that, what you see is in every single case is that those who be kind, who do the kindnesses, end up happier than they were at the start, before they started, and happier when compared to a control group. Scientists have also done studies when they realized that being kind is actually a natural antidepressant. And long-term studies look at people who report doing more kindnesses in their life have more resistance to mild to moderate depression. In fact, before the days of the use of pharmaceuticals to treat mental health issues, it was previously taught that kindness was the way to improve our mental health. And back in the late 18th century, there was a Quaker called William Chouke, one of his family had been placed in an asylum. And the asylums of the day, you've probably seen it in the films, people used to lock family members in the attic because it was something that people felt ashamed about. And, I'm glad there's so much talk on mental health now because I've struggled with depression a few times in my life, and it's great that it's becoming something that people talk about nowadays. But back then, my God, it was completely opposite. And in asylums, people were chained to the beds and things like that. And he'd noticed that his family member had been treated so terribly in this asylum, so took her out of the asylum. And he founded what's called the York Retreat. And what it was is it was a country home, and there was 30 people there who were depressed. And there was no treatment, no conventional treatment. The treatment was kindness. So they were encouraged to help each other. So for example, a few people's job was to look after the gardens. A few other people's job was to prepare the food. Other people's job was to cook the food. Other people's job was to tidy the living room. Other people had the job of tidying each other's bedrooms. And they were encouraged to support each other and to treat each other as family. And the goal of the whole thing was to understand that we are in the service of each other. Do you know, everyone recovered. And the model became so successful that it actually moved to the United States. And for nearly 100 years, that was actually the model for treatment of depression in America was kindness. And the Quakers actually used it a lot. It was only when pharmaceutical treatments came in the 20th century that we kind of forgot that being kind actually makes us feel a heck of a lot better. Psychiatrists of the day even said that kindness must cause, and I quote, organic changes in brain matter. We actually know that to be true now. Scientists studying, in fact, Mark put a great slide that I'm glad I don't have the same slide, because he was talking about the loving kindness meditation. He had a picture of Matthew Ricard, the Buddhist monk. And scientists studying the loving kindness meditation find nowadays that cultivating thoughts and feelings of kindness and love and compassion cause physical changes in the structure of the brain. The front of the brain above your eyes on the left-hand side, it's the seat of positive emotion, seat of gratitude and kindness and compassion. It tends to grow like a muscle in people who practice the loving kindness meditation, who experience the feelings of kindness and compassion consistently. And also a little area called the insula, which is like an empathy center of the brain. And it literally grows like a muscle. And he mentioned the term neuroplasticity. The brain isn't hardwired like we used to think, like you're born this way and your brain just stays the same. It actually grows and changes moment by moment, 365 days a year, in response to what you experience in life, what you learn, how you move, and also how you think and feel. And nowadays we understand that thinking and feeling kindness, compassion, love, affection, anything from the heart physically changes the brain. So collectively, it's very well known now that being kind it makes you happier. That's one of the side effects of kindness. One I wanted to focus a bit more on, the second one, which I find very exciting, is that kindness is good for the heart. And in particular, this is what set me off, because I was working in cardiovascular medicine when I worked in the pharmaceutical industry. And it turns out that kindness is the opposite of stress. And this is kind of why it has such a powerful effect on the heart. You know when you feel stressed, right? And I'll draw your attention, I put feel in wee quotes. When you feel stressed, it is the feelings of stress that flood your brain and body with stress hormones. I think most people have heard of adrenaline and cortisol. These are our stress hormones. But they don't get produced because of a particular physical situation. They get produced because how you feel about a particular situation. Because the same situation might be experienced very differently by two different people. So it's not the situation itself, it's how we feel. So the feelings of stress flood the brain and the body with stress hormones. But say when you be kind, how does that feel? It doesn't feel stressful, does it? It feels... Anyone like to volunteer? How does being kind make you feel? Anyone? Happy, yeah, happy. Connected, warm, nice. Psychologists kind of group all these feelings together and they call it elevation. But that feeling that you get through being kind, instead of producing stress hormones, it produces kindness hormones. So feelings associated with kindness produce kindness hormones. So just like feelings of stress produce stress hormones, feelings associated with being kind produce kindness hormones. And that's a kind of affectionate title. But in real chemistry terms, the main kindness hormone is called oxytocin. Now, women are more familiar with oxytocin than men. And the main reason for that is it's a reproductive hormone. It plays a role in giving birth. In fact, many women around the world are given oxytocin to induce labour. It's one of the reasons why doctors might say having sex after your due date can initiate labour, and it's because that can produce oxytocin. Oxytocin also plays a role in breastfeeding as well. But over the last decade, some of the major research has shown that it's actually one of the most important cardiovascular hormones. And what that means is it's of fundamental importance to your heart and your arteries. It's of fundamental importance. So when you be kind, and that feeling that you get, that feeling of warmth and connection and niceness You might just generally call it niceness. Whatever that feeling is for you, you turn on a little tap. And that little tap gets turned on and oxytocin starts floating through your arteries. And then what it does is it parks on the lining of your arteries. It doesn't really park. You know, like, see if you go into a big car park, now like motorway services, you'll see different parking bays of different shapes and sizes that are receptive to vehicles of different shapes and sizes. So you've got like big ones for buses and medium-sized ones for SUVs and smaller ones for ordinary cars and even tiny little ones for motorcycles and bikes and stuff. So you have different parking bays of different shapes and sizes that are receptive to vehicles of different shapes and sizes. So your arteries are a wee bit the same. And they have parking bays that are receptive, but they're not called parking bays, they're called receptors because they're receptive, but not to vehicles. They're receptive to hormones. And one of the hormones that has millions upon millions of parking bays lining the arteries is oxytocin. So when you be kind, because of how it makes you feel, a little tap turns on, and that little tap drips or floods into the arteries, and through the bloodstream, oxytocin goes, and then it just parks on the lining of your arteries. And then a few little fancy little things happen. But quite quickly, the walls of the arteries start to go soft. And when they go soft, they go and they expand. They make that noise as well. No, I don't really. But they go soft. So the walls of the arteries actually go soft and they expand. Now, when that happens, it means that your heart doesn't have to push quite as hard to get the blood through. So your blood pressure, your heart goes, oh man, I can chill out a bit here. And your heart kind of eases off the pressure. So the net effect is a drop in blood pressure. So oxytocin is actually called a cardioprotective hormone. Cardioprotective hormone because it protects your cardiovascular system. And one of the principal ways that it does it is it expands the arteries and drops blood pressure. Another thing that it does is it sweeps all the crap out of the arteries as well. That's a technical name. But there's a couple of groups of substances in the arteries that can eventually lead to cardiovascular disease. And oxytocin is like a little sweeping brush, and research shows that it actually sweeps some of this. It kind of cleans the blood out to a degree of some of these harmful factors. And this new research explains one of my favourite scientific studies. Favourite, I think, for its title, more than anything else. And the title of it is Marital Conflict Relations and Coronary Artery Calcification. There you go. Or CAC for short. You might be able to figure out a wee bit about that study just by the name. Marital Conflict Relations and Coronary Artery Calcification, or CAC. It's when the coronary artery shifts from having the internal consistency of like a poached egg to something more resembling plasterboard. And in this study, scientists got 150 married couples, and they invited them into a room, one couple at a time. And they asked them to discuss marital topics. So things that were relevant to their family life, you know, like the household finances, how the children are getting on at school, things that couples might not always see eye to eye on. And that was important. They wanted to videotape them having these conversations to see how they related to one another, to see what their attitude was and how they expressed that. And so they put them in the room, nice wee room, plant, window, video camera, and they asked them to start talking. Now, if you were in that study, think about it, you would probably, given there's a camera there, you'd be nicer than usual to your other half. So what the study does is research finds that somewhere between 11 and 16 minutes on average, people forget the camera's there. So they take out that first, they take up to 20 minutes, they delete off the tape. And they watch the last 10 minutes of tape, and they begin to grade the couples according to how they behave, how they communicate, their attitude. And at one end of the extreme, you get those who are defined as hostile aggressive, or male in that category might have strong bullying tendencies. Hostility was defined as expressed contempt. At the other end of the extreme, you had those who were more kind, compassionate. You might say softer, more heart-focused, more willing to listen, more tactile, more encouraging and supportive. And one of the most amazing symmetries I've ever come across in science, and when I say symmetry, I mean when something's symmetrical, one thing's reflected in another. The group who were more hostile, aggressive, or bullying, or what you might say hardened, they had high levels of hardening of the arteries. And those who were softer, kinder, more patient, more warm, emotionally warm, gentle, affectionate, they had quite healthy arteries. And when you took out of the equation diet, lifestyle, smoking, drinking, all that, the only real difference was how you treated the other person. And it seemed to be that as we harden towards each other, so we harden on the inside. And it seems to be that as we soften towards each other, so we soften on the inside. Isn't that one of the most amazing symmetries? In a real scientific way, it's kind of true. And the softening comes from the fact that as you be kind and gentle and show emotional warmth and compassion and really just lead with a heart to the best of your ability, you pour oxytocin into your arteries and it begins to soften the arteries, reducing the blood pressure and sweeping all the crap out. So it's amazing that nature has built in this protective mechanism, I think, to encourage us to be nice to each other. I think the world needs a lot of that right now. And I think it's genetically wired in us that nature has built this. Do you know the kindness gene? The gene for oxytocin is one of the oldest in the human genome. It's roughly 500 million years old and 2 days. No, but isn't that amazing? It's roughly 500 million years old. That's 500 million years to integrate itself into just about every single important system in the body. It's why that if a person is deprived of love and affection and connection, it's unhealthy. Some friends and I set up a charity called Spirit Aid Foundation, still running really well in Glasgow. I'm not involved anymore, but we started this up, and our first project actually was in Kosovo. And we went over with Glasgow, the Caring City, a charity partner at the time. And what amazed me, we were in these orphanages, and most of the children there were tiny. And it struck me, I thought they were like 5 and 6 years old, but in actual fact they were 9, 10, 11, and 12. And it turns out a long-term depriving of love and affection and warmth and touch shuts down the oxytocin gene and a gene for human growth hormone. It doesn't shut them down, but turns them down. So that the body needs human growth hormone and it needs oxytocin. Oxytocin plays a role in the construction of heart muscle cells and brain and liver, kidney, skin, cell, bones, etc. And when those two genes are turned down, then the body just doesn't grow. The same. One of the most hopeful pieces of research out of that whole research area, it's called the Bucharest Early Intervention Project, was a paper called Evidence for Massive Catch-Up After International Adoption. And they found that if children were adopted young enough, and moved into a warm, loving, affectionate, responsive family, then all the genes switched on and the body rapidly caught up and returned to normal. But the reason I'm telling you this is to get across the fundamental importance to the entire human organism for love and compassion and kindness and affection. We're supposed to be nice to each other. We're supposed to like each other. It's what we're supposed to do. And it's amazing that it's good for the heart. And we're also supposed to be nice to animals. I was writing some blogs at the time, and I found a heap of research that being kind to animals also switches on production of oxytocin. In fact, here's an amazing statistic for you. The chances of a second heart attack within 1 year in someone who's had a heart attack already, right? So the chances of a second heart attack within 1 year in someone who's had one already, if they have a dog, is 400% less. It is 400% less. Isn't that extraordinary? Originally, scientists assumed that that was a side effect of exercise. And absolutely, definitely, there is a lot to be said about the exercise you get from taking a dog for a walk. But in more recent years, it's been shown that a massive part of that statistic is the love and affection and the relationship and the play that you have with the dog. And this came to light a few years ago. Front page of one of the top scientific journals in the world. Science is one of the top scientific journals in the world. Scientists, would cut off their right arm to get an article in Science. In the UK, Nature is the UK equivalent. It's a huge, massive journal. Front page, a study measuring oxytocin levels in humans and dogs while they warmly, lovingly, and playfully interacted with each other. And the scientists videoed people interacting with the dogs. They split them into two groups because they had to. This statistic really is more true when you have a warm, loving relationship with the dog. So they watched videos first to see who had a good relationship. So in other words, who spent more time looking into the dog's eyes, where the eyes met, and they counted up all these times, and they said, we'll call these the long gazers, who over the half hour, they made eye contact a lot, so they've got a good relationship. And they studied the oxytocin changes, and amazingly, what they found, for every 1 minute warmly, playfully interacting with the dog, oxytocin levels increased at a rate of 10%. So 10% per minute for half an hour. Now see if someone prescribed a drug and said, by the way, if you take this, your oxytocin levels, that cardioprotective hormone, will increase at a rate of about 10% a minute for half an hour. It would be a blockbuster. It would be literally one of the biggest selling drugs of all time. And all you actually had to do was show love and affection and warmth and kindness. Isn't that extraordinary? Now, you would probably get the same effect from cats, rabbits, and horses. But it's just research hasn't done that yet. Historically, the research has been done on dogs, only because historically scientists assumed that most of the cardioprotective effect was from walking. But it's actually, that's part of it, but not all of it. A large part of it is the kindness and compassion and the love and the affection. That plays a considerable role. Another great way to produce oxytocin is to give someone a hug. Whoops. Hugs produce oxytocin. Scientists did a study where they asked a group of women to keep a diary over a month of all the hugs they experienced. And it turns out, at the end of the month, the women who had experienced the most hugs had by far the highest levels of oxytocin. You could almost say that a hug a day keeps the cardiologist away. but I mean, not entirely, but within reason, hugging people, that interaction does actually generate oxytocin, which is extraordinarily good for your heart. So that's the second side effect. In fact, just for a minute, why don't you turn around and give someone a hug, and we'll flood the room with oxytocin. Right, so give someone a hug. Now, how good does that feel? I'll tell you a few fundamentally important things happening right now. You've turned on a little tap, and oxytocin's actually flooding through the bloodstream, and it's cleaning it out. It's helping to clean the blood, and it's helping to regulate regulate blood pressure. And it's also flooding the brain, and it makes you feel better. Oxytocin is one of the happiness hormones. That's why it feels kind of nice. But it's also, get this, it's the third side effect. Oxytocin that you're producing by doing that is actually slowing your aging process at the cellular level. When scientists study aging of skin cells, one of the processes of aging in the skin is something called stress. But it's not the same stress that we feel. It's got a scientific name. It's called oxidative stress, otherwise known as free radicals. You might have heard of those, free radicals. So one of the key aging processes of cells in the skin, and throughout the inside of the body as well that you just don't see, is oxidative stress. And scientists were studying oxidative stress of skin cells, or the cells that form more than 90% of the skin. And they found that if you upped the concentrations of oxytocin in the skin, get this, oxidative stress literally dropped through the floor. So a massive reduction in oxidative stress, i.e. one of the key aging processes of skin, was massively reduced as we upped to levels of oxytocin. Now, I know we've heard today a lot about plant-based diets. You can't get oxytocin in your diet, unfortunately. You can't eat it or drink it. There is only one way to get it into your skin, into your heart, into your arteries, and that's to make it internally. And the best way to do that is through how you think and feel and how you behave. Be kind, lead from the heart. Show affection and warmth and compassion. Be kind to each other. Hug people. Be nice to animals. All these things that you would say come from the heart. And the more you practice living from the heart, the more oxytocin you produce, and it literally begins to flood not only your arteries, but get into your skin. And I can testify to this, that I have been being kind regularly for 87 years. No, I'm only kidding. 73. But I just dye my hair grey to make myself look my age. You know. But it's an extraordinary thing. And there's a number of processes of aging. One of them is called inflammation. One of the major processes of aging that you don't see because it mostly happens in the inside is called chronic low-grade inflammation. It's on the inside of the body. You can't really see it. It's kind of similar to if you cut yourself and it gets inflamed. That's inflammation. But chronic low-grade inflammation is a kind of background, similar thing that goes on inside the body, and it's usually a consequence of lifestyle, of the Western lifestyle. And it's one of the most key processes of aging. Now, it turns out the body has a very natural anti-inflammatory process. It has two, actually. It has two or three. One of them is governed by the nervous system. It's called the inflammatory reflex. And it mostly comes through the vagus nerve. Vagus nerve is the longest cranial nerve in the body, and vagus comes from the Latin for wandering. Like it wanders over the face, the throat, the heart, the lungs, liver, kidney, and it pretty much wanders around the body. And it actually controls, to a large degree, inflammation in the body. So if we can tone up the vagus nerve, and they actually call it toning up like we might tone up a muscle. If we can take the vagus nerve to the gym, then we might actually have an impact on inflammation all throughout the body. Well, it turns out we can. And one of the really clever and simple ways to tone up the vagus nerve is increase your feeling and experience of compassion. Scientists have measured this by getting people to do the Tibetan Buddhist meditation, the loving kindness. May you be filled with loving kindness and be well, peaceful and at ease, happy and free of suffering. And the consistent cultivation of the expressing of those words and the cultivation of the feelings that come with that. Actually, it's like taking your vagus nerve to the gym and it tones it up. And you get a system-wide anti-inflammatory effect. And that was, as I mentioned at the start of the talk, that was my introduction to this subject scientifically, was scientists measuring one of these same substances that I was familiar with from my time in the pharmaceutical industry. It's called interleukin-6. It's one of the inflammatory substances, and getting a drop, sizable drop in that, and related to people's inflammatory response to stress in their life. So in other words, inflammation dropping in separate experiments measuring toning up of the vagus nerve. The more time a person practices the loving kindness meditation and builds that feeling, so the more the vagus nerve seems to tone up, like you take it to the gym. And that has the anti-inflammatory effect in the body. So it sounds kind of, almost kind of unbelievable, but one of the ways to slow aging is to show compassion. And you think, my God, but I think nature has built this into us because we're supposed to show compassion. We're supposed to care, aren't we? We're supposed to care for each other. We're supposed to look out for each other, express kindness, compassion, emotional warmth. And that's why I think we have these genes. It's got us this far in human evolution. Another quick way to slow aging is one of the aging processes is called immunosenescence. It's a gradual weakening of the immune system. And research shows that kindness as well also has an impact on the immune system. Scientists got people to watch Mother Teresa on video carrying out acts of kindness and compassion in the streets of Calcutta and measured an immune factor in an immune antibody in the saliva called secretory immunoglobulin A. You don't need to know the name. I will test you at the end though. But it's like a double Y-shaped antibody. It's like a wee Y and another wee Y kind of antibody. And it's a good proxy for overall immune function. And scientists found that just by watching a 1-hour video of Mother Teresa, levels of SIGA shot up. And they stayed elevated for hours afterwards as people kept talking about the film and remembering how they felt when they watched a particular scene when Mother Teresa expressed kindness or compassion. And every time they kept topping up that feeling by remembering what was in the film, SIGA levels just kept springing up. So you're literally affecting your immune system simply because of how you feel. And it's the opposite of stress, because stress depresses the immune system, doesn't it? So obviously kindness has an opposite effect, and it's amazing that that's been measured. So that's the third side effect. The fourth one I'll kind of briefly skip over. Kindness improves relationships, and I think that's a no-brainer. I think we tend to like people who are kind to us, don't we? You don't really want to hang out with somebody who's not kind to you. So kindness improves relationships. Scientists studied people in the equivalent of the Big Brother house, and they found if they videotaped them all, and then and it's couples. So it was 126 newlywed couples, and they videotaped them interacting with each other for a whole day. And scientists began to code their behavior. And they realized that if one person said, "Oh, come and check this out," scientifically, they called it a bid for connection. It's just the words that scientists use, but it's basically saying to your partner, "Can you come and see this?" The other half will do one of two things. They will turn towards and engage and say, "Oh, what is that?" Or they'll show interest, or they will turn away. And they'll not be interested. They might be snap at them, or you say, "Oh yeah, okay," back to what they're doing, but not really show any interest. They will turn towards, or they will turn away. Now, it turned out they followed up 6 years later. 6 years later, those who were still together had turned towards nearly 90% of the time. Those whose relationships had broken up had only turned towards about a third of the time. And they came out with this magic ratio that as long as you turn towards 5 times more than you turn away, the relationship has a better chance of surviving. So outside of love, one of the most important ingredients in any kind of relationship, whether it's a romantic relationship or friends or colleagues, is kindness. It's the glue that literally holds relationships of all kinds together. The last side effect is kindness is contagious. If you drop a pebble in a pond, Susie mentioned this at the start, loved it. You drop a pebble in a pond and it goes plop, and it creates wee waves. If you follow the wave, the other side of the pond, a wee lily pad does that. It's got no idea why it's doing that. But the reason it's doing that is because of the wave. But that's what kindness does. It creates a little wave. Scientists, being scientists, have measured the wave. And they find that it goes out to what's called 3 social steps. Now, what that means is you be kind to someone, you help someone because it's the right thing to do. And then you go away and you leave it at that. What you don't see is what happens next. Scientists find that when you help someone and they're feeling better, they might feel elevation, might feel grateful or happier or relieved or connected or anything, but that general term they call elevation. Now, what happens is over the rest of the day, that person will probably be kind or kinder to several people purely as a consequence of how you made them feel. But each of those people will probably be kind or kinder because of how they now feel as a consequence of the first act of kindness you did. These people will be kind or kinder to other people. And scientists found, they followed them out. They said, so you be kind to someone, and that person will be kind or kinder to someone else. 1. That person will be kind or kinder to someone else. 2. And that person, because of how they feel, will be kind or kinder to someone else. 3 social steps. As a consequence of that tiny little thing you did, that you just thought, oh, it's just the right thing to do, and then you got on with the rest of your day. But what you didn't see is the ripple effect of it. Now, given the average degree of social interconnectedness in our society, you could estimate that the average person at each stage will be kind or kinder to 5 people. So you be kind to someone, you help someone, regardless of what the act is, and that person, because of that, will be kind or kinder to 5 more people throughout the course of the day. On average, some people it'll be 3 or 4, other people it'll be 9 or 10. But on average, 5. It averages out about 5. So that person will be kind or kinder to 5 people. Each of those 5 will be kind or kinder to 5 further people. 25. But each of those 25 will be kind or kinder to 5 further people. That's 125 people. If you ever wondered what impact you have on any one day, at the very least, every time you're helpful to someone, you're probably helping about 125 people further down the line without even realizing that that's what you're doing. Scientists have actually measured, as they call it, 3 degrees of separation. Kindness literally ripples to 3 degrees of separation. So don't ever doubt that you make a difference, because every single thing that you do that's kind is making a difference. Even if you don't see it at the time, what you don't see is what happens next as the day unfolds. I've been told to wrap up. It's been a real pleasure chatting with you today. I hope that was useful. If I don't see you again, enjoy the rest of your life. So thanks very much.